Hello, how are you? Kumusta po kayo? And thanks for tuning in to another edition of Paul Presents Art. So I took about a week, sort of like a bit of a video hiatus, just to sort of re-energize my batteries and also to do a little bit of rebranding. And now we're back to doing some videos. So I brought you over to the city of Burnaby today, which is adjacent to Vancouver, also built on the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we're going to go inside a Japanese-Canadian center called the Nikkei Museum. So the museum currently has a show by a 92-year-old Japanese-Canadian artist by the name of Setsuko Piroche. Her maiden name is actually Setsuko Hane, but she's been practicing for the past 70 years. So we're going to go and have a look at some woven textile puppets and some printmaking and pretty much a lot of different types of genres because it spans 70 years of artistic production. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and we're just going inside and have a look, okay? Alright, so we're just going to go through the gallery. This is the entrance, and the reason why I wanted to sort of go in here is because we're going to go and have a look up there for a little bit. Because there's a couple of woven sculptures by Setsuko, and we're going to see some other woven sculptures inside. But I just wanted to sort of show you these. These are called the swimmers. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that because about a few days ago, I was fortunate enough to actually go and attend one of the artist talks by the museum director and curator, Sherri, Shinobu, Kajiwara. And she was very informative in terms of the entire show, the life of Setsuko Piroche. And we're just going to go and hone in on this particular sort of like a panel here. I'm going to have this entire panel in the description area of this video. So included with that would be information about the gallery and when they're open. So we're just going to go in and have a look at the show. So the entire show is actually in sections, and we're going to go through each and every section slowly. But just as an introduction to the textile suspended soft sculptures, this is the didactic panel for that. And there's also a lot of other suspended soft sculptures here inside the gallery. Like this is one of them as well. And then there's also that one with a unicorn. And this one is actually a man on a bicycle, and it represents Pierre Piroche, who is Setsuko's husband who recently passed away. Now, the story behind Setsuko and Pierre was it's a really wonderful love story because apparently, so Setsuko was born in 1932 in Tokyo, Japan. And when she was of age, she did some traveling to India and to Australia. And in Australia is where she met her partner, Pierre Piroche, who at the time was actually a botanist. So what happened was that they decided to actually get married. But the thing about it is that when they returned to Japan, Setsuko's father had mentioned that it might not be a good idea for them to get married here in Japan because there's these things about, you know, mixed marriages in Japan. At the time, it was like the 50s or 60s, and it's not really something that's an accepted culture. So they decided to actually go to Australia to get married. Now, the funny thing is that when they went to Australia, they did get married there. The reception for people of Japanese descent wasn't really very good there either because it was just right after the Second World War. So, because of that dilemma that they can't live in Japan, they can't really live in Australia, they decided to actually come to Canada. And so that's where they came over to British Columbia, settled in North Vancouver for a period of time, and then they went and sort of like relocated over to Pitt Meadows. So we're going to go now and have a look at a set of paintings called nihonga. And this is the didactic panel for that. So not all of the paintings are nihonga. I think these paintings, from what I recall from Sherri, these are actually not really nihonga style. I mean, I don't know very much about nihonga, but nihonga is a type of Japanese painting style that kind of evolved right after the introduction of the Western. You know, when the Westerners started coming into Japan, they started coming in and having a lot of different types of technologies, and some of them are actually sort of like these really vibrant colors, aniline dyes for printmaking, and also mineral pigments that are suspended in oil. So the nihonga is actually a movement that has pretty much started around that time. Like, let's say about, I would say the early 19th century, from like about 1900s onwards. And apparently, these are very unusual for nihonga in terms of the style, because when you look at the style, there's also this sense of sort of like cubistic elements. Like one artist that I'm trying to sort of like look at right now with a sort of like similar sort of like a vein in terms of painting is Bernard Buffet, who is a French artist. And nihonga style, the actual subject matter is, in a sense, very sort of like very simple and very stylized and stylistic. They're not as exuberant in terms of the colors with regards to this. This particular painting is kind of like the, almost like a fox wedding, because when you look at this, the composition over there, that mask of that person is actually a fox. So there's this sense about the fox wedding with regard to this particular painting. Now, I did say that there's going to be some woven things here, because like earlier when we were looking at the styles of the wire sculptures, like over there, it was also mentioned to me that some of them are actually a little bit more recent. When I say recent, it's like maybe the last 30 or 20 years, because, you know, she's 92 years old, right? So she has a certain sort of like limited mobility and dexterity. But one of the things that's really kind of interesting here is that she had used some sort of like metallic wire that her husband had found for her. So the entire sort of like weaving process of this not only is like the traditional sort of like textile fabric that you use for weaving, but also some sort of like metallic sort of like sheen. That's why you're sort of like looking at these, and some of them have a bit of a shine to them. And then we're going to go and have a look at some of the puppets. Well, they're not really puppets. They're actually sort of like they're almost life-size, like when you're looking at this. But we're going to go to the didactic panel on the other side, and then we're going to go back to these, okay? So these are the textile doll sculptures. So I'm just going to focus on that. And then you can sort of read that at your leisure if you wish. So these pieces of textile doll sculptures is pretty much what made her very, very well known back in the 70s and the 80s, because there was this sort of like arts and craft revitalization movement during that time. And she is also very, very insistent on sort of like recycling a lot of fabrics. Like, for example, we're just going to go back on the other side. Okay, I know I'm just going around, but I just wanted you to sort of like have a really good feeling for these pieces. Like, for example, this one. This one is actually a very special pair, because on the right is actually a Haida chief, and on the left is a Kwak woman. And the entire story behind, I'm going to tell you about a story that was relayed to me by Sherri Kajiwara. So back in the early days, there was this really influential Ainu Japanese-Canadian indigenous artist named Biki Sunazawa. And he was coming to Canada. And I'm not sure if it's through the invitation of Setsuko, but what happened was that Setsuko had arranged for Biki to actually stay in Haida Gwaii with their friends, Bill Reed and Dr. Martine Reed. So Biki was actually staying in Haida Gwaii to try and sort of like disseminate the indigenous culture there. And it's really more of a cross-pollination in terms of the cultures. And as a thank you, Setsuko had created these two sculptures and had gifted it to Bill Reed and his wife, Dr. Martine Reed. So that's why these two pieces are here in the display. So these are actually coming from the collection of the Reeds. There's this really beautiful photograph of Setsuko here with her puppets. It's a black and white photograph with her puppets. And then there's another one here, not puppets, sorry, the textile dolls. And there's another one here. And the interesting thing about it is that the textiles are all woven by her. She knows how to use a loom. She knows how to card the wool. She knows how to sort of like use spinning wheels to actually create thread or yarn for the wool. And a lot of the pieces are actually sort of like back to front. There's like different sort of like personas. The front of the doll is different from the back of the doll, and they're both frontal. These two are really, really beautiful pieces too, and they have this sort of like sense of, let's say, like the indigenous Mexican tapete type of weaving or even color combination. When you look at, let's say, indigenous textile traditions in Mexico and South America. And she also is quite, she also knows how to weave ikat fabric, which is kind of like a traditional fabric that's also in, not only in Japan, but also in Africa and also in Indonesia. There's a lot of really quirky, sort of like beautiful textile pieces, and that's why this entire show is called Woven. It's to sort of like pay more attention to these woven sculptural textiles that she's done for a long period of time. And they're almost, like I said, they're almost all life-size. They're almost life-size. This is like the back of these two dolls. And then we're going to go here and have a look at the family unit over here. And this is a family unit. And a lot of the, like I mentioned before, a lot of the textiles and the materials she uses tend to be recycled because she's very, very much into sort of like recycling things and the ecological sort of like impact of how we use things in the world, especially when it comes to textiles, you know, like fast fashion industry is so wasteful. And she's very, very much into sort of like minding that and not really dealing with the entire sort of like sense of having a lot of waste. I'm going to go and focus on that because that's so beautiful. Then we're going to go into a little section called elephants. Now this section, I'm just going to go and focus on that because it also contains a little poem by her, which is an homage to elephants. You can read that at your leisure. This is also a photograph of Setsuko Piroche with one of the hanging sculptures. And these are the hanging elephants that are kind of like in the tradition of the wire sculptures that we saw in the front, you know, the fabric sculptures. And she also did these papier-mâché elephants. And during the talk, the museum director had asked the artist, why elephants? And I think she just has this really beautiful sort of reverence for the elephant. There's such elegant animals she had mentioned. And I'm assuming that because she had spent some time in India that these are actually Indian elephants. And each one has a different pattern. You can see this one as well. This is a different patterning. And they're all papier-mâché. And this is a little bit bigger, but I think this one is a combination of papier-mâché and textiles and thread. Now she's also done some prints. There's only one example of printmaking over here, which is this one, which is also kind of like in the theme of the elephants, but this one has giraffe, so this one is really more of an African sort of motif. And then we also go to a little sort of like section here on children's picture books and printmaking. I think when she started doing printmaking, she realized that she's also interested in sort of creating books. So this is a little table with a lot of the books that she had published. Most of them are in Japanese, some are in English, and there's one that's in Danish. And the curator doesn't know how actually the Danish version came about. So 70 years is a long time to sort of like have an artistic career, and you go from one sort of phase to another, and you go back and forth the phases. Like for example, this is another one of those textile works, and this one is a little bit kind of like, I think this is a little bit more used, because they were actually mentioning that when they first came to her place, her studio, the wire sculptures and some of these textiles were just pretty much strewn around the entire home. And they had to ask the Museum of Vancouver to bring one of their refrigeration units in order to kill a lot of the insects that may have actually manifested these sculptures, because they're all textiles, right? So there's probably going to be moths in there and some other things. And so they just wanted to make sure that everything is conserved. This is also a really beautiful vantage point where you can see some sort of like the scrim and the shadow of the wire sculptures peeking through this is a black scrim. And these two pieces over here are quite special. They're also textile dolls, but when you look very closely at the faces, they are patterned after masks of the No Theater, which is the traditional high art opera of Japan. And last but not the least, we're going to go to that little corner where they have weaving friendships. The title of the show, called Woven, pretty much alludes to the fact that she is sort of like a textile artist, and she uses a lot of textiles and fabrics in her work. But it also sort of like deals with weaving friendships with Bill Reed, with Biki Tsunazawa, with a whole slew of other people. And so this entire corner is pretty much dedicated to all of those friendships that she and her husband had developed over these past few years. So this particular wooden sculptures by Biki Tsunazawa, who is the artist that I mentioned earlier, who came to Canada and spent 3 months in Haida Gwaii, and being sort of like billeted by Bill and Martine Reed. And this is also a little sort of collaboration, I believe. It's a scroll, which we're just going to go through. And there's a dedication, Tokyo by Night, to Bill and Martine from Biki and Rio. And we're going to go also over here to have a look at this beautiful drawing. This drawing is by Bill Reed. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to be putting a lot of the information regarding certain aspects of this show in the bottom of the screen in text format, so that you can go and have a look at it and perhaps even do a bit more of research on your own. Now, there was also one other thing that I wanted to mention, because the thing about it is that she was born in 1932. She's a Japanese artist who actually survived the war, the Second World War, and pretty much was in Japan when the atomic bombs were actually dropped. And there's also a couple of other female Japanese artists of her generation, notably Yoko Ono and Yayoi Kusama, who actually had the same experiences. So they're all of the same contemporary generation, born in the late 1920s to 1930s. And the thing about it is that that becomes really, really significant with regards to how we can place the work of Setsuko Hane Piroche. And I just wanted to leave you with that sort of like a sense of the entire sort of like sense of her work in terms of like art historical discourses. So I'm going to end it on that. And I hope you enjoyed this tour of Setsuko Piroche's show here at the Nikkei Museum, curated by Makiko Hara and Sherri Shinobu Kajiwara. I'll have the information about the gallery in the bottom of the screen. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel. It's free for you to enjoy. You can also share it on your social media channels, and you can like this video as well. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. You have a great day, and I hope art informs your life. So I'll see you again soon, I hope. Goodbye.